I'm the son of Mr. Don E. Johnston, who has just been inscribed on our wall. My father operated 2 Dory boats over a period of a couple of 3 decades, the Lorry's Dory and the Lorry D. I'm accompanied, my brother Marty and my sister Lori are with me, and I've got a gaggle of Johnston family, of nephews and cousins and whatever. Raise your hand, because we're out here in court. So, very proud of you. So, my father's connection with Pacific City started in about 1967. I remember it vividly. I was in high school. My father was a real man's man. Elk hunting, fishing, you name it. And he was cursed with his choice of job, which was that of being a very exclusive, high-end beautician. He cut ladies' hair. And one day he came home from work and said, "I just can't take this anymore. I got to do something." And he announced to the family that he was going to buy a dory and start taking 4 months off of his business to start commercial fishing. And that's how we got connected. I was told that the original launch of Lorry's Dory was a little bit of a ripple, of a buzz, when the word went out among the seasoned dorymen that a couple of beauticians from Portland and their kids were going to go launch a dory. Fortunately, we launched it, and everything went well. Now, today, there's technology available that's cheap and accurate, and just about every car, every foot hunter, every fisherman has a GPS or a Loran or something. But back in 1968, that was not the case. The Lorry Dory had a pocket compass and a 1-watt, 1-channel CB. If you launched into the fog, my father's technique was fish all day, pull out your pocket compass, put it on a due east heading, set your gear for 60 feet, and if you hit sand, it would drag, and that tells you you were in sand south of the rock. And if your cannonball hit the rock north of the rock bottom, north of the rock, then you knew you were north, and either way you turn right or left, run into the rock, and take a compass bearing to get home in pea soup fog. And that was my father's dory technique for navigating in the fog before GPS. He later refined that. He and my brother fished for many years after I left the boating family. And Marty tells me that in the fog at Cape Lookout, Dad would light a Tiparillo cigar, take a preset compass bearing, and by the time the cigar burned to the tip, Dad would shut off the engine, and within 100 yards you'd hear the foghorn on the buoy, and that's how Dad would get home from Cape Lookout. So at some point the dory community got large enough to where the Sheriff's Department was overtaxed to keep all the routine business going. My father, my uncle, Byron Counts, and several other men were deputized as a Sheriff Marine Patrol deputy. My father's Sheriff plaque is still on display at the family business at Cape Kiwanda RV Park at Doryland Restaurant, if you're interested to go see it. As part of my father's duty, he had the unpleasant duty of recovering 2 bodies at sea and 1 in the surf, and take charge of everything until such time as the authorities arrived. One of my personal stories was in '68, the tuna water came in close, and we launched our dory, put it on a due west compass bearing, and after about 2 or 3 hours of running, way out of the sight of land, we hit tuna. We caught a boatload of tuna, and then at that point my dad said, "Well, I'm sleeping, take it home." By this time we had graduated from the pocket compass to a little gimbal-mounted compass mounted on the bow, so I did a by guess and by golly and put it on a south by southeast heading and just started heading home. And then, like a lot of other mariners over the centuries, about 2 hours into this, I stopped and looked, not stopped, but I look over my shoulder, and here's my wake, straight as an arrow, disappearing over the horizon, and not a speck of land to be seen. And I thought about waking up Dad, who was still sleeping, but then I remembered him saying, trust your compass. So I let Dad sleep, and about a half an hour later, sure enough, a little peck of land, and then a second one, and then pretty soon the whole shore. Of course, we ended up almost up to Tillamook because we'd never done this before and didn't realize how severe the northerly drift was. One of my favorite stories about my father is a story of devotion to duty and of seamanship and of rescue. In the 80s, the tuna water was in close and dories were regularly heading out to sea 30, 40 miles, sometimes 50. Late afternoon, a dory boat with a full load of tuna reports his engine's blown about 25 miles way out there. Without much discussion, my father contacted his neighbor, Ray Morgan, and grabbed my brother, and they launched Dory D from the surf early evening, 6:30, 7 o'clock. The stricken dory had a very primitive type of Loran, so Dad could tell sort of where it was. It started to get dark. My dad radioed the stricken dory and said, stand on your console and hold a flashlight. And of course, in a calm ocean, a single light at sea, even the dark, is remarkably visible. Using the flashlight, my dad zeroed in on the stricken vessel, brought it under tow. My brother remembers vividly it got very, very dark, and you could not see the towed vessel except for the ashes of the guy's cigarette. Using that primitive Loran, the stricken boat got my father more or less within eyesight of the rock here. Strictly very, very dark, of course. My father then radioed into the beach and said, all of the beachfront, all of the cars, lights out, and I want one car turned to the west with a flasher going, the emergency flasher. Honing in on that one single flasher, my father navigated the stricken boat and the Dory D through the gap, brought him up close to the surf, and then cut the stricken boat loose. That skipper was competent enough to row in with a stricken vessel loaded with fish, a square stern dory, which is an interesting feat in itself and beyond my story. Once Dad confirmed that the stricken dory was safely ashore, he circled back out to the Cape, picked up a nice swell, and rowed it in and made a textbook landing. At that time, he was totally astonished. About 300 car lights flipped on, horns started honking, and apparently at least half of the village was on the beach, making sure that one of their own got back home safely. That's the kind of community Pacific City is. That was the kind of man that my father was. Of course, I'm very proud of my father. It's a mark of respect, and my family appreciates that the Dorymen have given this mark of respect to my father. Thank you.